So here we are again with Explore Ecstatic Sensuality. You know that people say that this is a podcast, and golly, I just don't know about this term podcast. It brings to mind a film that I saw when I was very, very young. I basically stopped watching television when I was in the 6th grade. I thought it was a kind of a waste of time. But what I watched when I did watch television were kind of like horror and science fiction films because they were just groovy and fine and wonderful. And one of the films that I liked very much was a film called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, certain individuals place pods into the cellars or living rooms or fireplaces or closets of other people. And what happens with those pods is that they break open and they release new people who are simulacra of the people who were replaced. So Uncle Ira, for example, is Uncle Ira. He looks like Uncle Ira, he talks like Uncle Ira, except people very close to him realize that there's something missing. He's not really Uncle Ira. In one scene, an actor, young actor at the time named Clint Eastwood, remember him? Oh yeah, plays the gas man, and he goes down into the basement, allegedly, ostensibly to read the gas meter, but what is he really doing? He's planting a pod, and when that pod bursts open, it will replace the occupants of the house with these simulacra. Curious thing. And back to object relations and Melanie Klein, in a certain way, these simulacra are part objects because they're physically the people who were replaced, and in every outward way, they're the people who they've replaced, except they're not the entire person. They're part objects of the person. So if you go around and try to deal with these people, you're back in the Melanie Klein's paranoid schizoid position. The other way of looking at it, see, we're going back all the way to episode number 1, is that from a Platonic perspective, these replacement perfect people, they have no defects, they have no scars, they have no limps or anything like that. They're just perfect replicas. But these are perhaps the ideal types, the forms, So the forms of Plato, the forms of which we are pale shadows, in his allegory of the cave, we're in a cave watching shadows, all of a sudden, everyone is perfect. And that's, of course, thanks to some egregious plan devised by an unknown and unspecified alien species of some sort. I'd like to propose a toast this morning to aliens everywhere. You'll get bonus miles if you visit Earth now, I can promise you that. The pandemic is kind of winding down, not that you would be susceptible to it, but all the entertainment venues are open. All the theme parks, the studio tours, etc. Back to horror films. Growing up with these things, I watch movies like Back from the Dead, Mill the Stone Women. You should catch that one. I think my favorite was a film called I Bury the Living by an interesting director named Albert Band, otherwise known as the Bandito in the business. He had a writing partner named Louis Garfinkel, and they made a bunch of films, a lot of them quite interesting. So when I was had my yacht in Cannes every year during the festival, and people would come to, all the big shots would come to meet with me looking for money. And I was somewhat parsimonious in doling out money in production slates, production positions for projects, but I did, finance some projects there. So every year, Albert Band would come by the yacht, and heck, we were never, he wanted to remake I Bury the Living, with that wonderful actor Richard Boone. Of course, Richard Boone no longer being with us, he would replace Richard Boone. But I met with him every year. He was a nice old man. Really was. And It's interesting going to the Cannes Film Festival. One year, I received an invitation to meet with Marcel Carné, have dinner with Marcel Carné, director of Les Enfants de Paradis, Children of Paradise, which according to some people is the greatest French film ever made. I might have chosen instead Bruno Dumont's or Satan, Hadovich, something along those lines. But, Les Bonnes Femmes by Claude Chabrol, but, sort of meaner little movies. But anyway, you were sitting there with Marcel Carné, and what was interesting was he was very old at the time. He was there with his partner, his male partner. And what was curious about that is that no one from my French office wanted to go. They didn't think that Marcel Carné was worth a couple of hours of their time. Curious deal, this life we live in. So, you have just seen some quotations about love. And, I know someone else, other people who compile these quotations on the same subject, and I'm sure that mine would be different from yours or from these other people I know. You will have seen some familiar names: Jacques Lacan, Sigmund Freud, Ingeborg Bachmann, the Austrian writer who wrote the Todesarten trilogy of novels, one of my favorites, inspired in some ways my own Sophia trilogy of novels, which you'll see in a few months on your bookstore, and you'll get to meet me and I will sign your copy. So look forward to that. I'll be right there signing away. So those are some of my observations on love, or rather not mine, but the ones I felt were pertinent and of interest from other people, and I drink to those people. Harry Crosby, he's in there somewhere. Interesting group of people. Arseny Tarkovsky is in there. A whole bunch of people. I think, just can't get enough of people talking about this odd thing. Love and desire. I read this morning a statement by Jackson Browne. I used to live next door to Jackson Browne in Studio City, and it's interesting. For his, I think it was 50th birthday, he invited me to attend, which was very nice. And musicians were performing there. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Remember them? That's a little bit way before my time, but Crosby, Stills, and Nash were performing right there in my backyard. And after that, kind of silence. It was really, really weird. Not too much happened at Jackson Browne's house in beautiful Studio City, California. But what Jackson Browne said, according to what I read this morning, is desire is the last domino to fall. And a lot of the quotations that you just read deal with desire. And whether love and desire are the same thing, a lot of people say that. I'm not sure that's true. So if desire is the last domino to fall, then so is love, mutatis mutandis. Consider that. But anyway, after a sip, everyone knows what this is by now. This is green tea, ginseng, and just a dollop, a pinch, a little bit more than a pinch, 2 pinches of tang. They keep advertising hydration drinks. How are they better than tap water? I don't know, but the marketing people have a pretty good idea about this. I want to talk about something which is a really interesting topic for me, which is this topic of infatuation. Okay, different topic from the topic of love. This takes me back, during my brief time before the sixth grade watching television, but then later on watching old movies. In watching old movies, dads were either, or men were either, they all went to their offices, and in that, when what they now call the professional managerial class, PMC, and those guys all pretty much looked the same. I mean, to me, maybe women had their ideas as to whether, Gregory Peck was, more handsome than, who was another star back then? Rock Hudson? I don't remember those guys. They don't impact me too much. Never did. But and then in the guys who had factory jobs or auto mechanics and other kinds of jobs, didn't much matter what they looked like. There weren't a lot of particularly handsome men playing those roles. I remember an actor named William Bendix. All this was way before my time, like watching old movies on YouTube, whatever. Most of them. Kirk Douglas, he was a guy, but I mean that type of guy. Was he supposed to be good looking? I don't know. He had a certain personality. I guess that he had a dimple. Is that not the case? I don't have a dimple. Should I have one, installed? Can I do that? But then, over the last, I don't know how long it's been, I talked about narcissism in which episode? I think 4, maybe 3. Wasn't 2 or what? But we went through narcissism, and I've been told it was an excellent presentation on the subject of narcissism, and I'm very proud to have done that for my listeners and viewers here in this non-podcast. But I think we're in now definitely an era of narcissism, and the emphasis on male narcissism and male looks and the sex appeal of the physical presence of the male as communicated by their looks is perhaps much greater than it was. I mean, I don't have that frame of reference. I mean, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s are like, before my time. But today, I think, and women, from what I consider, are very, tend to be very responsive to these guys who fit what is the current Bradley Cooper. He's old. I don't know. I mean, there's got to be, who is some woman out there has got to, fill me in as to which of the male actors or singers, rappers. I'm thinking I'm actually putting a rap album out next year, so wait for that. I'll sign your copy of that too. But women are always looking for that. And if you're kind of like me, a little bit below average in appearance, it was interesting. My mother was very much a big teen one, into physical appearance. So she chose the most handsome man she could possibly find. And during her pregnancy, she took all kinds of weird drugs to make sure she didn't have a miscarriage, because it was her project to have an extremely attractive child, male or female. Then I popped out. Oh boy. And I was not that child. I wasn't an attractive infant or child, young person. So when I was very young, I found some correspondence between my mother and my father, and she had a nickname for me, which was the pudding. And, puddings are just kind of little lumps. And, most of my life I've been just a little lump. I mean, and she always used to say, when I would star in high school play, I played Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. Can you believe that? Well, yeah, I was actually okay. And other roles in high school. We did a bunch of plays just by ourselves. Theater of the Absurd was fun, although it was more or less passé by the time we got around to it. But thinking of the time back then, and thinking of my experience, my mother would go to these events, and she'd sit in the audience, and she would invariably say, "Randolph, that girl playing the oboe is a girl you should really ask out." And that girl was invariably seriously overweight and had seriously bad skin. I mean, seriously bad skin. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the message I got as far as girls were concerned from my mother was, know your place. And sometimes for some of us that's not such bad advice. We develop, men and women both develop infatuations, which is, and we talked about maybe a little bit about this before. It's I said somewhere in a previous video that if you express love to someone, that person does not incur any obligation to love you back or even to respond to that in a particular way. And it must be horrible. I mean, I've never been in a role, but to have a kind of not so attractive person of either sex, no matter how close you may be in terms of interests, we'll call them, or helping each other with various things, or I knew a woman I was attracted to, and she was not attracted to me at all. But that's anyway, very beautiful woman, and she called it Zazazoom. If there's no Zazazoom, ain't no possibility for a relationship. Then one night when we would show up to parties, whether we went together or went separately, and we'd spend the whole evening talking. That's what we did, and we just had this sort of relationship. I was involved in many aspects of her life, but this particular party was very little food. It arrived late. When it arrived, it was not that great. And she kept saying, "Would you, give me another margarita and give me another glass of wine?" And I thought that I was behind her. But then I guess the time came, the moment came when it came to say goodbye or whatever, and I hugged her, which I'd never done before, and I said, "I love you." And she hasn't spoken with me since or communicated, which I think is it's kind of good advice for somebody. This, if you're in a one-sided infatuation, that's where you are. You ain't going no place. Just live with it. Live with it. Know your place, accept yourself, and possibly, a couple of times I thought it happened, I thought, a woman I was very close to was, kind of interested in exploring ecstatic sensuality with me. And then it turned out that they didn't, it's kind of typical. But anyway, don't hurt yourself like that. I think it's really good advice. Know your place as far as this love business is concerned. Know your place and just go through life. Have creative, activities. In my novels that you'll be seeing later this year, in addition to, there's crime at various levels, including big-time racist crime, actually. And there's, my goodness, that the whole crime thing goes completely out of control. There's a mystery involving the death of a voodoo priest in Brooklyn, New York. But there are also, throughout the book, there are people who have sexual encounters, and the sexual encounters are the books are described. But my editors and people who read these, who are reading these books, coming up with quotations for their release, say, Randolph, there's all kinds of these amazing love stories. All of a sudden, there's this amazing love story, happening in this book. People have this spark and communication, and it all happens at once. But and it's not like the sex is an afterthought or the love is an afterthought. The love and the sensuality and the sexuality all spark, all flame, all flare with these people who are, to my way of thinking, two rules of writing is, one, watch the movie, which is to say, if you can't actually see what you're writing about, as if it's a movie playing in your mind. Don't write that day. And rule number 2 is, I'll be saying this at all my book signing appearances, I know, and that is people show up for a reason. So if someone shows up for a reason and you're writing, and all of a sudden this person walks in the room, don't kick them out because they don't fit your structure, your outline. Outlines, all this stuff. In the movie business, people had this idea for a while of writing a movie on the basis of scene cards. They put these little 3x5 cards on a bulletin board, believe it or not. And a writer would come in and say, this is the movie. It's all laid out on scene cards. And then if I was stupid enough to pay the writer, the script would come back and it was just blum, 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 chug, 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 chug. Because the reality of that mysterious character showing up, or not so mysterious character showing up. And they mess things up, but in a good way, much of the time. Anyway, why am I talking about writing? You should try it. If you don't have an active love life, why don't you write something? Or sculpt something, or paint something. Athletics are good for some people. I'm not so much of an athletic type of person. There's so many things if you don't have an active love life. And by love life, I mean love and an amorous life involving sensuality and those sorts of things with a person, of the other gender or your own gender. I don't know that much about. Well, as a writer, I know something about everything, and my books have all kinds of sexual encounters. Let's just say, clearly ones in which I have not participated, but that's it's good to have an active fantasy life, but don't let it lead you into infatuations, which are basically not that great thing. Someone I know was talking about communication in relationships and truth. Here we're going off on a tangent, but we'll wrap up like this. And I was thinking that the best film about communication and truth in relationships is a film called Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick. I didn't have much, that 2001 stuff. I mean, what happened in the real year 2001? Wasn't that when 9/11 happened? Or am I wrong? Am I off by a year? 2001, all of our great ideas about the wondrous exploration of the universe didn't happen. And, it's probably a good thing. But, I mean, in this film, Tom Cruise, in his best performance by far, and his that-time wife, Nicole Kidman, in certainly one of her best, are a married couple, and they have to face issues of truth, deception in a certain way, withholding parts of themselves and their experiences, and the consequences of doing that. And there's a resolution to that, which I'll throw up on the screen very shortly at the end of this video, and the final dialogue in the movie. If you've heard negative things about the film, and I certainly know people who can't stand Eyes Wide Shut. To me, it's one of the, made in, I think, 1999, and I think it's an amazing, as far as English language films, it's an extraordinary film. All the performances are fantastic, not just Tom and Nicole, but it's amazing how he cast so-called secondary roles. Some filmmakers do that. Bruno Dumont, whom I'll mention all the time, is very good at casting secondary roles. Lars von Trier, another one of my favorite directors. Of course, Ingmar Bergman had his stock company, so he always, such wonderful Swedish actors. Anyway, this is my little non-podcast, my little rant for a morning here. And whether anything I said is applicable to you or applicable to someone whom you know. Some people say applicable. Do you say applicable or applicable? I think that's a key determination of what kind of person you are, and I haven't I haven't decided which one that is. Mine, by the way, they have all these personality things. Boy, I studied all of that. The Big Four, the Big Five, the hexagram, and all these. We're trying to put everybody in a category as far as personality is concerned. Creativity is correlates strongly, positively with openness to new experience. That's one thing that we know. But I always said that kind of a key determinant of your personality type is, do you prefer making things or do you prefer playing games? Growing up, I was always the person who preferred making things rather than the person who preferred playing games. Nowadays, I think with the whole video game thing, so I was going to say rampant, but I'll hold myself back on that. Unless you're making a video game, actually making it, well, you just want to play it, unless you're actually designing it. I'm not a video game player, so I don't know the answer to that. But, I think that leading the creative life within your own limitations, leading a life of love within your own limitations. These are the things I want to leave you with here on this morning. Luckily, a somewhat cool morning here where I am, in contrast to how it has been. Thank you so much for joining me here once again on Explore Ecstatic Sensuality.